You are now watching the NeuroEngineering podcast for leaders with Veli Ndaba, the NeuroEngineer, where we have interesting conversations with thought leaders, transforming leaders from leadership darkness to leadership light. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this episode.
Welcome to this episode of the NeuroEngineering podcast for leaders, where we get up close and personal with industry leaders and those who are making great changes in our world. And I'm just so excited today that I'm going to be introducing someone that I'll be having a discussion with, talking about the neuroscience of effective leadership, because this is something that is very passionate to my heart. And as we're just talking about leadership, we're not just talking about any kind of leadership, but I'm talking about effective leadership. And the person that I'm going to be introducing to you shortly is something that inspires me, and I'm sure he's going to do the same thing, because I believe that he is really someone who represents something that we want to see in our world, because our world is just so filled with fluff. And I think for me, fluff is not the thing. It's about trying to make sure that we introduce things that really work. And when I talk about this person, I'm talking about someone that I'm so proud to introduce to you as our listeners and our viewers, that you will really find something interesting in what we're going to be talking about, because it is really my honor to introduce someone, a leader in this case, who is really, who embodies things like resilience, who embodies things like strategic vision, and he leads one of our dynamic mobile operators. And this is someone who started off his journey as a call center agent, believe it or not. And I'm talking about Jorge Mendes, who is the CEO at Cell C. So ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome George.
Thank you, Veli. Thank you very much for that very humbling introduction. It's a great pleasure to be here. I've been inspired by yourself the first time we met, and your ability to bring light to difficult and tough situations, which is the life we go through. So it's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have.
Thank you very much. And George, I mean, you've just been with the organization for about 2 years. But if you look at the impressive turnaround, because I know that's one of the things that you talk about, turnarounds and culture, those are some of your mantras. And I'm very fascinated in terms of how you got about, achieving those things. But I think before we get to that, I just want to give you an opportunity just to introduce yourself, maybe beyond what I've just said. Who is Jorge Mendes? And really, I just wanted you to paint a picture to us and our viewers in terms of how was your upbringing and growing up? I mean, what really influenced you into a person that you are today? And when you look at how it has shaped, your leadership philosophy and just your philosophy in life.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, obviously, if I go right back to the beginning, I was born to Portuguese parents. I'm Portuguese. I arrived in South Africa with 5 months. I'm 51, I'll be 52 next year. So in my entire life, I've been in South Africa. I'm South African much more than I am anything else. Obviously, I have Portuguese heritage and culture. Probably why I like food so much, and breaking bread at the table is a big thing for me. And I enjoy cooking as well, by the way. So, there's 4 of us as siblings. My parents couldn't speak a word of English, so we spoke Portuguese at home because they didn't have another method of communicating. We got brought up in the southern suburbs of Johannesburg, not too far from here. So in La Rochelle, Turfentine, Rosettenville, Kenilworth, Regent's Park, Boysens. So eventually in Boysens, where we lived. So we went into working and studying and living in those environments. If you take going back 30, 40 years, you had a fruit and veg on the one corner, a butcher on the other corner, a bakery on the other corner. So you had a bit of a community that would allow you to get to know everybody. You knew your neighbors on the left, the neighbors in front of you, the neighbors on the right. It was not uncommon to say, hey, we're out of XYZ. Do you mind if we could borrow some and then we'll replace it? Wow. So that kind of community living created a deep understanding to care for one another. We have Ubuntu, if you like, in today's language and communication, that really exemplifies and makes sure that we talk about these things. So we got brought up that way. And I say humble beginnings was a blessing, not a disadvantage, an absolute advantage. And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, hang on to what they perceive perhaps as negativities from their background, but that's the reason why I couldn't. We couldn't afford this, we couldn't afford that. I mean, I'll go so far as to say that, when I went to high school, I went to John or Tech. I had naughty siblings, so one was not allowed to go to that school and the other one was not allowed to that school. So I was recommended to go to another school. It would be advantageous that, with the Mendes surname, they're not going to have this history to deal with. So I went to John Orr Technical High School. I would get onto 2 buses a day, one from La Rochelle into the terminus in town, and then from there, second bus to Auckland Park. And I was very surprised because I was always quite a small individual, and I had a red and a green blazer, and this guy with a plain green blazer and a red trimming, he literally pulled me out of the bus, and I still gave him like a bit of attitude and said, he's not even in my school, man. What the hell is this guy on about? So it turns out that's the head boy, and they wear a different blazer. So not only was he definitely in my school, he was in charge. He also had almost a grown beard, so I was a bit worried that there's grown-up men that are the school head boy. So you quickly grow up, and I've always wanted to do architecture, and I kind of went into technical drawing. That was the field that I wanted to go in. You barely pass, you do what you can. You're coming from this kind of background and environment. And then I was very entrepreneurial, and I got into the liquor trade. I was working part-time in liquor stores on a Friday afternoon and on a Saturday. Then I had some shebeens that I was supplying. I told my boss, do you mind if I also supply these guys? And he humored me. I mean, I was obviously like a kid. And then he said, no problem. He gave me a small credit facility. I bought from him. I sold to the shebeens. I would drive a 1400 Nissan Bakkie to go and deliver. And then I got into the liquor trade, and I was held up 3 times. And on the 3rd time, then they killed the one partner. I got shot, and I landed up in ICU at Joburg Gen at the time. And this is on the 16th of August in 1993. And so for me, that was a turning point in my life. I was in ICU for quite a long time. Small bowel, big bowel, bladder, intestines, kidney, all that was damaged. I took 59 staples down the front. So it looks like a cool tattoo, like I've got a built-in zip. But the reality is that psychologically, I think, has an impact on your life. And you can choose to do something with that trauma. And if you use that trauma in a positive way, and I think I've always been jovial, I've always been naughty and mischievous, I've always had jokes, but I do serious things. So I kind of approach life a bit lighthearted, but serious things can be done in a lighthearted way or in a fun way. And that's how I then got into the industry, which I guess we'll talk about it, because I said from that moment onwards, I need a safe office job. I think this cash register business is a problem. I can see what's going on here. At this rate, I'm not going to make it. It's the 3rd time. And in June of 1994, 1 year later, after doing a few odds and ends, I said I'll join this company called Teljoy Cellular Services as a call center agent. So I went from all of this into a safe job in 100 Claim Street, Johannesburg, which had a taxi rank on one corner, a brothel on the other side, and a church on the other side, strangely enough. So that's how I landed up in this industry, actually.
Wow, man, that's such a powerful thing. And I love what you just said. That humble beginning, I mean, like having a humble beginning, it's not a disadvantage. Actually, it is an advantage. And it comes back to my story as well, because when I look at it and how everything started, it gave me so much strength. And like today, when you look at my story, when you listen to it, then you start to realize that, I developed a lot of strength. And talking about thick skin back then, because I mean, for me, I didn't see myself as a victim, but I mean, when I look at it now, I was developed in becoming a victor. So when I look at this, and that's why one of my favorite quotes today is, God will never allow his work to be made manifest by cowards. And I just love that, because it ties in to what we're just saying now, to say, you've paid your dues, man, and now you've got a very fancy and cushy job in the office,
I won't say cushy. It might be
somehow.
Fancy, I don't know how cushy it is.
Yeah. So when you look at these things, and I was looking at something to say, from neuroscience, we talk about the fact that up to 95% of who you are by age 35 is already a program. It means you are programmed. You are no longer just thinking by yourself, but the program is driving you. And one of the guys said, it was Albert E. Gray. He said that we do not choose our futures, but we choose our habits. And it is our habits that decide our futures.
Sure.
That ties into that. So it means in the 95% of the program that drives you as a person, it's important to understand and to start creating those habits that are favorable to you. So when you look at your goals and your dreams, it's about developing those habits that are meant to drive you towards those goals.
Absolutely.
Because you are not fixed as a person, but the brain is plastic-like when you talk about neuroplasticity. And I think it brings me to the next thing in terms of, as a CEO in particular, is it something that came to your mind some time back, let's say about 20 years ago or 15 years ago, thinking and saying, one day I want to be a CEO? Or is it something that happened not by surprise, but you were led into it?
Yeah, I think, to be brutally honest, I've never woken up at any stage of my life and said, oof, from this day onwards, I'm going to work towards being a CEO. I've approached almost everything that I've done with the best ability that I have. So I can mop floors, which I've done many, many times. I can clean a house. I wash dishes. And I do them very well, by the way. Not that I'm embarrassed about it. I'm very domesticated. At home, my family says I'm a bit OCD because I like things neat and structured. So I have no problem making a bed. None of those things are a chore that's beyond me or beneath me. And, so whenever I do something, I try and do it to the best of my ability. And so it's not about saying, okay, well, one day I want to be this or one day I want to be that. I'm very competitive. I don't go in with half measure when we put in effort to whatever it is that I want to do. Hence, we were chatting offline about golf, where I played golf recreationally, let's say a corporate golfer once a month, once every 2 months. And because of my competitive nature, it's very frustrating because I want to go and play once every 2 or 3 months and win the competition, or at least come out on par. So when you're coming out with 100+ scores, it's very frustrating. And they say the only two problems you have with golf is distance and direction, sometimes together in the same shot.
I understand.
So you got to do what you really enjoy, because then you never feel like you're working.
Yeah.
But no matter what the chore is, if you do it to the best of you, I'll give you an example. If your dad says, as an instruction, go and wash his car, the way you wash that vehicle is as a chore.
Yes.
You tick a box and you do it because you have to do it, mainly out of fear and you don't want to get in trouble.
Yeah.
But when you wash your own first car, the very first car that you have, let me tell you, you can spend hours there. You can grab the toothbrush in between the rims in the mag wheels. You can get Mr. Min and spray the dashboard. You'll slide off that seat. That's how much effort you put into it. You'll put all the love and care and attention into it because you really want to do it, as opposed to a chore or an activity that you have to do. So I think for me, it's been, whatever you put your effort into, there's always someone watching. People don't get promoted on the day of the interview. They get promoted, especially inside organizations, long before that. You can't have a bad attitude for 2 years, and on the day of the interview, you're amazing. The bad attitude for 2 years is not forgotten. So you get promoted way before the actual event takes place.
Yes.
There's people watching all the time, and if you don't have a great attitude, if you don't have a team player spirit, if you don't have a care in the world for other people, so it's about yourself and you become an I specialist, I this, I that, I this, then it's a problem. So the more effort and hard work you put in, the more likelihood that you will succeed. It doesn't make me better than someone else because I have a job title. I had many job titles in my life. One was a call center agent and one is a CEO. They're different roles, they're different responsibilities. One is a tea lady. I have a philosophy that I live by where I try and recognize people. So even the security guard that I greet every day, Jeffrey has now been promoted, but greet him every day. Then he's recognized and he feels like somebody, which is rightfully so. He's not lesser because he does a different role. No one wakes up in the morning and says, I really want to aspire to be a domestic worker. They do it because that's what they have to do to survive. And if they do it to the best of their ability, hopefully the family that they're with has a good human aspect to them and a rapport, which allows them to then also allow the family to progress, and vice versa, and look after the upbringing of the kids, etc. So I'm not a better person because I have a job title. I'm not more important because I have a job title. I've got greater responsibility. I have different responsibilities.
Yes.
But for me, it's not, I want to be in charge. I want to be a CEO one day. I've always put in the effort that I can. I try the best at everything that I do. I like to bring people on a journey with me. I think that's a bit of the people leadership stuff. I'm not selfish that way. I love seeing other people do well. It gives me great pleasure. I'm actually very proud of what they then go on to achieve. I genuinely am. I say to people all the time, I was at colleagues the other day, they've just moved into a new building, some people in our industry. And I was genuinely telling them how proud I am about their building. It's beautiful and what they've done and how well they've done. And they found it a bit weird, and I'm saying, but I really am proud of what you've been able to achieve.
Just saying that, George. And I think for me, it's not just about what you're saying. It's what I've experienced with you. I think the first time that I came and I spoke at CELC, and somehow we connected, and I found you very jolly. You were very playful. I mean, for someone who's at your level, and I was just laughing along, and I said to myself, "Wow, this is like a joke," and I think for me, and I said to myself, it would be very nice to have George in studio, just to share, for others to understand that you don't need to be so uptight. When you're in these positions, because it's about you having to work through other people and to bring in that energy and that light. And I think that's something that inspired me, because I saw it in person. I mean, I experienced that myself, and it's not something you're talking about. And before I ask the next question, I just want to share maybe these statistics. I mean, it says that before COVID-19, the world was seriously grappling with motivation. Motivated stuff. As a result of that, globally, they're talking about issues like, I think in Europe, about 83% of employees are disengaged.
Wow.
You go and look at things like in Japan, about 81% of the staff is disengaged. And you look at North America, Brazil, Mexico, and those, about 76% is disengaged. And us in Africa, South Africa in particular, we're looking at about 85%. Now, that tells you that if you're saying 80% of the people are disengaged, it means out of 10 people, 8 of them are disengaged. Only 2 of them go to work to deliver or to bring their best selves to work.
It's quite scary.
And this is the reality. This is something that we are dealing with. So it means, as organizations, the main issue is not the strategic vision or strategic planning. It's not about financial management, but it's about people that have to bring their best selves to work every day. And as a CEO, I'm just from Botswana, and I was speaking at a conference, and I was talking about these things to say, the CEO has, one of the CEOs was actually sharing, on stage, that the 3 main roles for a CEO, or jobs, or responsibilities, are culture, people, and the numbers. And this is where things get to be in that order, of people, of culture, people, and numbers. What do you say as someone who's very passionate about culture as well? And I've seen you doing things. That's the reason why I was talking about it earlier, that you've had this impressive turnaround at CELC. You took it as a somewhat ailing, and look at what you've done now. And this is something that we need to talk about, not just read about it on newspapers or watch it on television. What can you say about that, especially when you talk about that order? Does it make sense to you about culture, people, and the numbers?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've always been deeply passionate about people. I've been deeply passionate about what people can bring to the table. I really mean that. I think when we've got a slogan at the moment, which is unstoppable, right? Yes. When you think of an unstoppable team, just unpack that word. If nothing can stop you, then that's really, really impressive. Now, it's not your divine right. You're not entitled to it. It's more around plan A, B, C, never giving up, resilient, preparation. That's what unstoppable means. Unstoppable is not something that you just drink the Kool-Aid and, then you're unstoppable. It doesn't work that way. You have to put in the effort. So I am deeply passionate about people. That's why we want to partner deeply, so that we've got very strong partnerships. It's not about transactions.
Yeah.
Transactions come and go. They're fickle because there's no loyalty.
Yes.
There's no deep meaning behind it. I'll shop here or I'll shop there. That's transactional. When you look at partnerships, they go way beyond the transaction. It's got about a bigger purpose. There's a mission at stake. And that's what we've created at Cell C. I think it's not uncommon. People know that we were in a dire situation.
Yeah.
I've been quoted as saying, we've got a balance sheet that looks like a crime scene. And that's the truth of it. There's more red tape everywhere than anything else. So we had to build a nice team. We had to have a very clear plan. We've been building for the last 2 years. We've made a significant amount of changes to many, many agreements, contracts, structures, strategy. But the bottom line is, most organizations say, if I give my strategy to the next company, they still won't be able to execute it because of the people and so on. But many will be caught out with that, unfortunately, because yes, the culture does determine quite a significant amount, but you need to stick to your knitting. I've been offered many roles in different industries that sounded interesting, but I realized you have to be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
So typically, I've realized that over time, I really enjoy fixing or building stuff versus maintaining stuff. So if there's a very well-run business, and then I get appointed to run that business, I will feel like I haven't done much with it. I will feel like I'm just maintaining what was there, which is kind of not a role that really motivates me, at least not at this stage in my life. Maybe one day, as you get closer to retirement or whatever, maybe that role plays something closer to your heart. But for now, definitely not. I think if I can try and summarize it, I think my role is to cultivate the soil, so to speak, if I can use that analogy. So if I've got an environment that is conducive to all things good taking place because of the environment. So if I cultivate the soil beautifully, that when somebody drops a seed of innovation, something starts happening. If someone drops a seed of an idea, that something starts happening. If someone plants a little change request, that just blossoms nicely. I think that's what we've got to do as leaders. It's not about being soft and fluffy. That's what you mentioned earlier. In fact, you need to be fair and consistent, and sometimes that comes with harshness. You take kids growing up. Yes. It's not that you let them do whatever they want to do that makes you a good parent. Yeah. In fact, to the contrary, a little bit of a smack on the behind every now and then, and 5 minutes later they're back on your lap and they love you to bits because that's a bit of discipline. Yes. That's a bit of guardrails that you set out. Yes. So I think it's an approach that's but maybe not well understood, that we have to know numbers. No, in fact, every person that I employ in my exco is more intelligent and more professional than me in their field, and because that's the whole point, right? If I'm better than my IT guy in his field, if I'm better than my CFO in her field, and so on, why am I hiring these people? Why are these people part of the team? They are fundamentally better than me, and as a collective, we complement each other very, very well. So you often find organizations, they hire an electrician, and in no time at all, they're trying to make them a plumber. And I'm saying, but why would you do that? Why don't you hire the best electrician you can get and then use their skills and capabilities for what they're there for? You go to the doctor, you say, doctor, I've got this problem. Doctor tells you say, I disagree with you. I say, okay, well then if you know, why are you seeing me? I'm the professional. And I guess it's a bad example because today everyone uses Google.
Absolutely,
and so,
absolutely.
So I think it's about cultivating the soil and creating that environment. So it does lend very nicely to culture. I have stated before that I would love Cell C to have the best culture in the country, not in the telco space, not in the tech space, in the country. That would be a dream, to really have the best culture. And we're trying a whole bunch of different policies that are progressive, that support that. I think we're quite far down the road.
Yes.
On a number of these, it's only 2 years in, so you have to give it time. But I think we're prepared to take those kind of calculated risks and really make sure that we've got a great environment.
Yes, and you just mentioned something. There's something that keeps on playing in my mind as I'm talking with you, and I just wanted to emphasize that. To our viewers once again. George mentioned the difference between getting your dad asking you to wash his car, and how you go about washing it. You do it as a job because you want to please him. Not even pleasing him, but you want to get over and done with it. But remember washing your first car. You took all the time. You can take even the entire day washing it. Going to those tiniest places to clean it off. And I think for me, this is the beautiful analogy that we can be using every day when you wake up in the morning. Are you going there just to do someone a favor, just to go and to pay the bills? Or are you going there to bring your best self to work so that you grow and you see that as an opportunity? Because it's a platform for you to grow. When you go to the workplace. And I was looking at that. And that leads me to the second question, George. In terms of, let's think of a school. Let's create this hypothetical school, this classroom. Now you have to bring in here about 10 leaders that you need to develop. What are the top 3 things that, knowing what you know now, that leaders really need to have and need to know as a skill?
Yeah, I think there's a lot, right? But if you start summarizing what the 3 things, you have to be people-centric. There's no question about that. If you're going to lead people, there's a level of EQ, there's a level of sympathy, there's a level of understanding that's got to do with people in order to lead people, right? The best leaders, if you take the sporting environment, today we're very grateful to have the bragging rights about how well we're doing in sport. And if you look at our sport in general, rugby specifically, but not limited to, there's a thing about the leadership that is man managing, and I say man managing man or woman, individuals for the collective good. So this is not about you lose 3-0 as a football team, but you're collecting man of the match awards for an individual. You need to ensure that the team wins or loses. So in leadership, you have to have people skills, and people skills is listening. Deep you know how many people don't listen? They pretend to listen. They're calculating what the response is. They're not deeply taking in what you're saying. They actually are not listening, to be brutally honest. It only looks that way. Then you see the response. You see the response was premeditated, was calculated. They just want to reply. They're not trying to deeply listen to understand. So just a basic thing like just listening and really paying it, be in the moment, be present, right? So today, all over the show, you'll see communication taking place and people aren't there. Their mind is somewhere else. They're on their device, they're on their laptop, they're whatever. They're not in the moment. They're not giving you that attention for just the 5 or 10 minutes. That's all the people interaction stuff, people engagement stuff that talks about just listening carefully, being empathetic, giving someone the time. Make sure that they understand the value of that, right? That's important because the one thing that we don't have is the luxury of time. If there's one thing that we could bottle up to resell as a commodity, it would be time. If I could sell you this bottle of time, I'm telling you, we'd make a fortune. This buys you 24 more hours. This big bottle buys you 1 more week. That would be unbelievable. But we don't. And we are on borrowed time permanently. As we sit here today, touch wood, we don't know when we will see each other again. So I try and make it a habit, an absolute habit of every phone call, every WhatsApp, every time I leave home or not, that I tell my loved ones that I love them, and because it might be the last time. And you always find out there's very tragic incidents that happen where you say, but I just spoke to him or her 10 minutes ago or last night and I didn't know. I do this exercise. I say to people, if I have this envelope with your expiry date on, and I ask 10 people, I say, would you open it or would you not open it? And you get a mixed bag of responses. Some people say, yes, I would open it, and others, no, I would never open it. When you ask the people, why would you open it? It's because they want to know when their date is. And I say, fine, that's a valid response. Why would you want to know your date? Because if I knew that I had little time, then I would change things. I said, what things would you change?
Wow. Yeah.
If you had long time, would you change anything? No, probably not, because, if they've got another 100 years, who cares? Yeah. So it's only people that feel that if there's a possibility that I have less time, then I will change things. So why don't we behave that way, right? Why don't we behave in a way that suggests every day is a bonus, make the most of it. Plan as if you're going to live forever, i.e. those are called insurance policies, life policies, a will, that stuff is in order. In case I live long, I'm able to retire in a reasonable way. But apart from that, I'm going to do the stuff that I enjoy. So why do I have to wait until one day when I'm big, one day when I have this? I was known in my previous organization, even when I left, they said, hire the damn Ferrari. Because I had the saying that says, you don't have to buy it and own it to have the experience. Just rent it for 1 hour and you get that feeling. When you go on holiday, you don't buy the whole resort you just rent one room for the 3 days or 7 days and you get the same experience as if you'd own the place. So I know I digress slightly, but I think it's about when we are trying to create leaders, they have to have all the people stuff, empathy, listening skills, that kind of ability. You need to be able to actually convey and communicate messages very clearly. Yeah. People don't speak clearly. People say a lot of stuff. It sounds intellectual in one sentence. Then you unpack it and you ask your colleague, what did he say? Or what did she say? And then nobody knows. It sounded great, but they don't know what to do next. So that clarity is critically important, even if it feels like, without being making anyone feel bad that they're ignorant. No, even if it feels like you're repeating, and just for clarity, this is the summary, this is what I expect. By Friday, this week Friday, A, B, C, D needs to happen. Yes. We can't miss. Yes. These other 3 things, we can afford to let that go another 2 weeks, but these we cannot miss by this Friday. That level of clarity is proper important. I think one also needs to understand that with there's the movie, I think it's Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility.
Absolutely.
When you're on a leadership role, it's the old story of you looking at 100 people, 100 people are looking at you. Yeah. You don't see much, they see everything. They see your ear move, they see your eye flap, they hang on to every word, they see you touch your nose. That means he's not telling the truth, the body language, the whatever. We heard what he said, but we didn't believe it because of the tone, energy was wrong. They dissect everything because you are being looked at. Yeah. You are in the leadership role. And if that doesn't come across authentically, that's the next one. Yeah. The people stuff, authenticity is better than anything else. Yeah. I can't change who I am. I can improve. I can make adjustments. I can be respectful of others. I must look at other people's views, but I am still, George is George, Veli is Veli. Yes. And that authenticity will allow people to like him or her, or dislike him or her, but they can never question the authenticity. Absolutely. It's a bit like fairness. You may like the answer, you may not like the answer, but it's fair and consistent, that you can't fault, and that's more important than all these other things. So I think authenticity really comes into that in a big way. Too many leaders want to read a book and it's nice. You want to give guidance and say, if you take this, you see the magic lessons, and life don't work like that. If it worked like that, you could open that packet, pour hot water, drink the soup, and you'd be a leader tomorrow.
I'm just fascinated by this as well. I mean, as a CEO, you look at many other executives, including CEOs as well. Why do you think they tend to overlook people stuff, being people-centric, and they are all about bottom line? Yep. Just focusing on that. Because when you start talking like now, someone will be listening to you saying people first. And that's something that you live as well. And the others now is being soft now. Yeah. Because now we want to talk money here. How much are we going to make? You talk to people, they say how much. I mean, even when you look at some leadership or training interventions, some of them are not really making sense.
Sure.
They just tick box exercises.
No, sure.
But I want to hear from you as a CEO. Why do you think that's the case? I know it comes with pressure, but what can you say to someone like that? Because we tend to create this binary world, of either or. Is it people or bottom line? And instead of seeing this as a spectrum of both, because one is on the other end of the spectrum, but the other, because with sick people, you cannot get, like those high profits.
Absolutely.
And for them, they think that it's either profits or people, and it cannot. How do we shift people from this binary approach, to business?
That's a great point. And I think it's the tyranny of the or, right? You've got to do this or that. Well, you can do that and that. In fact, it's highly recommended.
Absolutely.
So do we have to deliver profits? Yes, we run organizations that's got shareholders. They need a return on investment. That's a given. I don't mince my words. It's an absolute, highly recommended to make profit. Trust me, I come from the sales environment. I know the difficulty. So it's very, very recommended to make profits and sustainable organization, because if you are a sustainable organization, that provides the livelihoods for the very people that you're trying to create a great culture, and that culture is, amongst other things, improving their life. And part of improving their life is that they can have the ability to really improve their and their families' lifestyles, right? So it's not about affording all fancy stuff, but you do want to have a better quality of life. That's the whole purpose behind this. So it is highly recommended. I think there's a combination of factors here. I'll touch on a few. I think performance metrics are skewed these days. They're very short-term focused. So what you're seeing is listed organizations, or even not listed organizations, having to deliver results short-term. So every quarter. And so what you tell is a story this quarter, next quarter, next quarter, next quarter. And so you have to deliver quarter-on-quarter results, which means some significant short-term thinking for performance metrics, bonuses, structures, rewards, recognition, etc., which sometimes could be overtaken by the longer-term strategy, the sustainability of the organization. I mean, I'd go so far as to say that if you run a business very well, the way it should be run, most likely your share price will reflect that. If you run a business for the share price, most likely your business won't be run well. It's a very subtle but significant difference. If you run the business well, ultimately your share price will reflect it. If you run a business for the share price, most likely the business will suffer at some stage, because businesses go through different phases.
True.
Startup phase, maturity, diversification, M&A activity, expansion, organic growth, etc., etc. And these different phases require different pieces of communication to the board and investors, the investment community, analysts. This information requires a number of months of signaling where we're going, a change in strategy, etc. And these are not easy, by the way. If it was easy, anyone could do it. I'm just suggesting that these are practical things that one has to go through. So it's not either or. You will not be able to deliver sustainable organizations from a profit point of view and great financial metrics forever without having great people. Now, you'll go through phases. You'll find a lot of the time it's linked to leadership. Culture kind of starts there. So there's a significant role to play as a leader, but one also has to ensure that there's succession, if you like, in culture that gets passed on, so that it's our culture, not his culture, That's a big piece of what needs to.
And it's just saying that I was actually listening to one of the CEOs, at a global level as well, was talking about this very issue, to say, because the question is, whenever I interact with executives and leaders of organizations about why succession planning fails. Succession plan, you find that those plans, they fall by the wayside. And why is that? You find that some leaders always focus on themselves. And she was saying, when I left the organization, I left the board with a beautiful problem, because I had developed about 6 successors that they had to choose from. And he was saying, so, and a CEO's responsibility, or one of them, is to develop a pipeline where when they leave, then the board can have about 4 or 5 people to choose from.
Sure.
Because what they tend to do is that many leaders fail at developing that or creating a pool, because they think these people are going to be ready and I won't be ready to jump out.
Sure.
So now I'm going to be pushed out, which is one of the reasons. Have you ever experienced something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you're going to have that in different organizations. You're going to have, one has to be comfortable that if you surround yourself with better people than you, that's a good start. If you surround yourself with people that are lesser than you and you do that intentional, that's already the first sign of not creating succession, right? Absolutely. That's already the first signal of, I want to hang on to this role for a long time, because no one here, I'm going to be very clear that, I'm not going to put too many smart people around me that when they look for choices for succession, they're going to say, well, you're a bit short, give it some more time, etc., etc. So that's normally a telltale sign. But I think one has to be mature about this and say, you have a purpose, you have a lifespan, right? A lot of people want wealth, and they want it in a certain time frame. A lot of wealth is created over a very short period. If you think of when we really are at a peak, if you take the way we are able to deliver and give back, things are changing. They're changing a little bit now, and you look at the different generations, and it's a lot more fast-paced, and the days are gone where you're going to work for a company for 50 years and they're going to give you a gold pen on your retirement and so on. I was listening to a talk the other day, and talking about the future jobs are going to change 29 times in your career, no longer 3 or 4, which is the current number.
Which is
so
3 or 4, yeah,
much faster pace, right? So the loyalty, not so much there, but do you want loyalty? Maybe you don't. Maybe the world's different, that says, I'm going to do this role for 2-3 years, that role for 2-3 years. That's actually becoming something that's really powerful.
Yes.
But the point that I'm making is that if you think of organizations that have a leader for a long time without succession, that can be good, because you don't want a lot of change in leadership, but you want good succession.
Yes.
Surround yourself with good people. Don't put yourself at the top of every decision. Then you see that filter through in organizations. So when people can make decisions in forums, in structures, whether it's governance, decision-making bodies, etc., without you, that's quite good. I was extremely disappointed many years ago when I found out that I'm actually not that needed. In my mind, if I'm not in a meeting, it can't continue without me. And many years ago, more than 2 decades ago, I thought if the meeting went ahead without me, of course I've got a valuable contribution. So I was kind of disappointed that, wow, this can carry on without me. How valuable am I, or how invaluable am I at that stage? But you mature and you grow up and you realize, actually, that's what you want. Yeah. Life should be able to carry on because you've got frameworks and you've got structures and you've got depth that allows us to happen. And that's kind of the process of making sure that you kind of hand over work, right? It's not abdication.
Yes.
It's not abdication. It's handing over work. Let them run with it, make some mistakes that are acceptable, learn from that, and life carries on. And that, I think, is what's necessary more and more these days in bringing people on a journey. I don't want to be that guy that pulls the ladder up, I climb the ladder, then I pull the ladder out underneath and just look at others. That should never be the situation for us.
Because I'm looking at that, and that leads me to the next point, the importance of self-confidence as a leader. Because when I look at you, the reason why most people are relaxed is because they believe in themselves. They are very comfortable in their own skins.
Sure.
How do you think that's something that's a trainable trait, or is it a skill that one can train? And how have you experienced that? Because I see a lot of leaders who are very short when it comes to self-confidence, and they will mask it with different things, as if they try to show up big, and you find that it's ego, but it's not self-confidence. Hence, they want everything just to revolve around them.
Sure,
like to your point, you're talking about that you felt like, oh my goodness, am I not needed now here?
Sure.
And that, but it takes a lot of confidence. And how do you, George, inculcate that in a culture, organizational culture, where leaders need to be very much aware that for them to develop the sustainability, they need to create, other people so that they can be able to take over when time comes.
Yeah, it's a good point. I've accepted many things. I'm vulnerable. I put myself out there. I realize that there will be other CEOs. There will be people that come and go, and maybe in 100 years from now, no one will even remember my name. Who was this guy? Yeah. This half a meter Portuguese guy somewhere. No one will remember. So we give ourselves a lot more importance than is necessary in certain roles. Yeah. So I want to try and improve my life and the people around me. I want to try and improve our environment a little bit every day, that when someone comes to our work environment, they actually enjoy coming there. They want to be there. They want to add value, as opposed to that Sunday night carte blanche feeling that the next day, the anxiety kicks in. I've got to go to work tomorrow. The environment, my boss. I don't want that. You spend the bulk of your awake life as an adult in your work environment.
Yes, true.
So imagine wasting more than half of your awake life in something that you dislike and hate. That would be insane. Then I think of, okay, if my job is going to be advertised much faster than somebody can actually speak at my funeral, then that's the way the world is, right? So
true.
I need to make an impact in the way that I need to make an impact, in my authentic way, in my vulnerable way. We're all flawed as human beings in some way. That's okay. But do more right than wrong every day. And if you're on the side of progress and you're on the side of adding and not subtracting and taking away, you're on the side of improving one thing every day, a little bit at a time, I think you're making a difference. The moment that we have that, then we have to be okay with our imperfections. We have to be okay with some bad choices that we've made. Not that it's okay, not that it's highly recommended. It's going to happen. There's no perfect leader that's going to make every right decision, every single absolute choice. But we're going to, normally it comes from a bit of trauma, by the way, and I think, Veli, you know this more than most. When you realize the importance of life in general, then EBITDA 1% more higher is not really a big deal, you know. 1 rand more or less on profit, it's not really big. Making profit is a big deal as opposed to losing. But 1 rand more or less, 3 rand more or less, a million rand more or less on this or that, it's not good. We'll put our energy on there. So if you beat the other team 5-0 or 1-0 or on a penalty shootout after extra time, the result counts. But, you know, the reality is no one passed on. The match was peaceful. There wasn't a stampede. We're very passionate about the result, obviously, and we like to support winning teams. That's what we love. So that's the passion that comes through. But it's not really a big deal. So we have to have a bit of emotion for these things. That's what gives us the drive, etc. But it's not about this thing of, you know, you have to make every perfect decision as a leader. So it's okay to be vulnerable. You know, when we do our town halls, you were there at one of those. It's not a perfect production for a TV show. We're having this podcast at the moment. It's a real conversation, you know. It's not about the makeup and all that stuff and did he say the right word, or there's some authenticity that has to come through, which I think is what I'm saying in terms of leaders. People will say it's okay, you know, Veli, he made a mistake with that sentence. He said this instead of that. It's fine. He wasn't meant to be perfect. He was just delivering the message. We got the message.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the saying still goes that people don't leave organizations. They leave bad bosses. Obviously, some colleagues as well. And I think whenever people leave as a manager, you need to reflect somehow and say maybe could have done things differently. And do you think that reflection is something that many leaders have, or it becomes like good riddance? Because normally when I talk about those things and I say, how many people do you think want to come back after 2-3 months after leaving the organization? And if none of those, as a leader, you must be very worried.
No, I agree with that. I agree, Veli. I think that's look, there's a couple of ways to look at it, right? When you don't take responsibility, it's always about them. You'll see they'll come back. They left a good thing. They're going to learn a lesson. In no time at all, they'll be back here. Try and find a better place than this. This place, the best. Look at the restaurants we have. You know, look, the parking. Every parking bay has shade cover. You know, they're not going to get this anyway, etc., etc. So there's a justification about this thing. Now, you're going to have attrition. You're going to have people that leave. Actually, it's highly recommended. If people leave for the right reasons, for their own growth and career, that's okay. That's perfectly, you actually wish them well and say, you know what, I think you're making an unbelievable choice. At the same time, if you're leaving purely for money, there needs to be a conversation, because you should never leave for money. You should leave for what it is that you are aspiring to be, growth path, direction, environment, opportunities. It's that the money, you don't leave for less. So that you accept. Don't say, ooh, I can't wait to earn a bit less. Let me go look for this job. Nobody does that. But at the same time, when people leave and you have tick a box, exit interview, and the exit interview says, I didn't like this. I was harassed by this. I didn't like that process. I got this intimidation. I got this and whatever. And the list goes on about stuff that happened. If that is not used to proactively improve the organization, then why have the exit interview? It's just going to keep on happening. So there has to be that reflection. You're going to have people that come and go, But I think, I've unfortunately fired many people in my life. And in almost every instance, they've thanked me for it, because there's a way to do it with dignity.
Yes.
There's a way to do it, even when somebody has done bad for the company. If there's a criminal thing, that's a bit different, right? Then that process must follow that process. But when it's not working out, then there's a way to not completely damage somebody and give them an opportunity to be successful elsewhere. And in that process, you can do it with dignity and respect. You don't have to belittle somebody and degrade them to such a severe point that, people can be suicidal. You don't know what they're going through. People can be in a very bad space, and what you've done is just push them over the edge. This is just something that hasn't worked out. Please may it work out somewhere else. You're not the right fit for us, is the message. You can be the right fit elsewhere. So there's still dignity and respect that has to follow through with that. I think you have to reflect as a leader and say, if everyone, it's the old story.
Yeah.
If 10 people are complaining about me, the problem must be me.
Absolutely.
It cannot be all the other 10 people.
And now, George, what is the question so far that you would have loved to answer that I did not ask you?
To be honest, I'm not sure. We've had a kind of conversation about a whole bunch of stuff.
Absolutely.
I think, to be honest, Veli, we're very much on the same page, and I've been very fascinated how you've taken the neuroscience, and especially through talks that we've done, that you've done with our teams to make people understand this linkage, right? I think that's an important part. For me, people is what it's about. We're going to win or lose. We're going to have bad days. We're going to have good days. Yes. And they're saying, hard times make good leaders and soft times make not so good leaders, right? So good leaders, and you see it with kids, and you've got to, it's that fine balance. It's almost better and easier to parent with nothing, because you remove a bit of the choices and you build a bit of character. You build a little bit of character. When you have spoiled for choice, would you like 64 of the pink sweets, or would you like the yellow ones? Would you like the one with wrapping or the one without wrapping? No, you can take that one only, because that's the one we can afford, and you must share it with your brother and your sister. That's a easier way to parent.
And that's a beautiful one. And when I talk about neuroscience, one of the things that it brought to the fore, it's the three musketeers that I talk about, the three musketeers of peak performance. And those musketeers are, number one is, it comes and talks about things like self-awareness. That as a person, you need to be self-aware. Because if you're not, then you will end up biting off more than you can chew. I think that's one of the great things. For to sure. Say, if you don't, and that's one thing that I get to do, to introduce people to themselves, and as I normally call it, by transforming their minds from mental darkness to mental light. And then the second one that we talk about willpower. Willpower is like a battery. When you wake up in the morning, you want to make sure that your phone is fully charged. Because if it's not, it can, without a charger, then your attention span or your focus will be disturbed by that. And if it's not fully charged, then you're going to have a problem. So that's what tends to happen with people, because right now, the top three things that we're battling with in the world are stress, anxiety, burnout, and depression. And yet there's less focus that is given to that. And it links to that disengagement that we spoke about. And then lastly, it's emotional intelligence.
Sure.
And with what we have been saying here, I've been picking up a lot of those things, like around things like self-confidence, emotional intelligence, and understanding that there are people behind numbers. We cannot just be talking about profits, because it's not an either-or game. It's not a binary game. It's a question of both, to say how do we work and develop people while we also don't drop the ball, financially. I think that's a kind of of thinking that we need to have. And on that one, how do you talk to someone who aspires to be a leader and then to be a CEO? What conversation do you have with that person, maybe just briefly?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things, but one is a good attitude. A good positive attitude, and a good positive attitude is not just waking up and say, yes, I can do it. You need a good attitude all round. You need a plan. What is the plan? You've got to prepare, right? So if you're going to have a breakfast that takes time, you have to wake up a certain amount of time before that, or you have to pack a lunchbox the night before. That's preparation. That's planning. In the world, it's the same thing. You can't rock up for a meeting arrive at the meeting and say what the meeting's about, then that's not planning. Where's the preparation? So, many times you see this. Still in today's day and age, people arrive and say, what's this meeting about? Well, what are you doing here? If you don't even know what it's about, what are you doing? So it's not a meet and greet, that's fine. This one meet and greet, see how the conversation goes. If there's a meeting about something, so if you fail to prepare, then definitely you're going to prepare to fail, because that's what's going to happen. It's just, there's no other way around it, right? There's no pain, no gain, anything. You want muscles, you go to the gym, you exercise, you eat food, you eat certain type of food, you sacrifice other things to have those muscles.
Yes.
You want to gain an academic qualification, you need to put in the hours. You need to study, you need to learn, you need to unlearn, you need to prepare, you need to do assignments, you need to do group assignments, you need to get some rest so that you're fresh to write the exams, etc. But it comes with effort. You want to eat a beautiful meal? Takes preparation. Ask me, I cook, I know. You spend 3-4 hours preparing. People are done in 10 minutes. It's over in 10 minutes. The execution is 10 minutes, 15 minutes max. And hopefully you get a few compliments. That's really rewarding. I love to see other people enjoy the food. Go, this is delicious. That gives me great satisfaction. But you take the guy that breaks world record to run 100 meters under 10 seconds. 10 seconds. It's over in 10 seconds.
Absolutely.
But it takes years and years and days and every day preparation to do that. That's why I have an issue. I mean, John Sine was talking to us a week ago at our conference. We had a business partner conference. And he reached out on one of the social media platforms saying he got asked to speak for this global company, a very strong brand globally and whatever, and then it was all great and going well. They got these budgets, until they said, would you do it for free? For your exposure. And I'm like, and my mind blows, right? How can, this is what someone does as a professional for a living.
Absolutely.
Is it any different from saying, hey, to the mechanic, would you come and fix my car for free, for exposure? Would you come and build my house as a builder for free, for exposure? I'll put a little placard that says construction company ABC built this house for free. No. So how can someone have the audacity to think that you shouldn't pay for that? I guess the message is the amount of effort and time and preparation for someone to arrive as a professional, as the polished article, as the end result. And expect someone to say, no, you will just do it for free kind of thing. And if you don't prepare and don't plan, you're never going to achieve. But at the same time, someone should not take advantage of that, right? You want to be a leader, prepare, have the preparation, always have the great attitude, have vision, have foresight. Don't think you got the only answer. You need to check, you need to listen, you need to, all of that is very, very important. You need to have some detailed understanding about what you do. As I've said before, I've been offered roles in different industries. I haven't taken them. In most instances, I've declined the headhunting conversation right from the get-go. The headhunter says, but you don't even know what it's about. You said, this is the industry. That's enough for me. I don't want to do that. No, but I don't want to do that because I know there's certain things that I can do very well and other things that I can't. So I have to acknowledge my shortcomings or my capabilities. I must, in a sense, stay in my lane a little bit, right? Of course, I must veer off. But, I'm not going to go from a great architect to building construction to vegetable farming to, satellite. You got to stick to your knitting a little bit.
And as we're about to wrap up, George, and I think maybe this question that I just want to ask you in terms of what you have noticed with many leaders in different industries, do you really feel that leaders are well prepared for their roles? Because it's about people. People. I know when you get promoted, even if you go to business schools, they drill a lot of operations, economics, financial management, strategy, and people are not really an issue around there. So most leaders are trained on how to manage businesses. But leadership, I see it as something that comes beyond management because you've done the matrix, the KPIs. Now, what about people? Because that one, to bring out the best in others, you need to be able to be about people.
No, I agree with that. I think the mentoring and coaching and so on, that goes beyond just being prepared for a CEO or being a leader is critically important. So you need to interact with other colleagues.
Yes.
You need to have round table conversations. You need to put yourself out there. Yolanda Cuba, a former colleague of mine, has got the mentorship program.
Yeah.
You're correct.
Yes.
And so I'm in there as a mentor, and we're busy setting up the mentee and so on. And to give someone an opportunity, you got to give back. You got to have these conversations. You got to have. I did a program, a management program with Harvard, and I met colleagues from all over the world through this program. And it's just fascinating to understand what they go through in India, what they go through in China, what they go through in Kenya, in different fields, in different sectors, and get that understanding. I think that's critically important to understand the different dynamics, regulatory framework, governmental things, stakeholder engagement, because running the business is one piece. I'd go so far as to say it starts becoming the smaller piece of what you do. When you look at a regulatory framework, competition law, government, stakeholder engagement, all those, they're critically important. Investor relations.
Yes.
That's all got nothing to do with running the business.
Yeah.
Of course, it's linked, but running a business well does not automatically guarantee you success for these other things that I speak about. And so what might feel like a waste of time for someone to engage with a particular authority or person in whatever format, because there's not a direct transaction for the business, is a shortcoming. Because if you go into meetings to always get something out, you will never win. You'll have to go into conversations. We met each other with no intention of extracting value one way or the other. Absolutely. You meet, you see where it goes, you like each other's company, you like the energy, you add to each other rather than subtract. All those kind of things, then say, aha. So in future, there's a conversation that goes along the lines of, do you know someone who can do ABC? And you'll say, yes, I know someone. And I'll say, yes, I know someone. I've got just the guy. Yes. And so what you did as the initial engagement or engagements that had nothing to do with extracting value from a business point of view will very much land up extracting value from a business point of view later on, because your network is very, very powerful. Yes. But that level of managing these different components is becoming increasingly more important in the modern world. It's less about just running the business. That's almost a given. If you're in a leadership role and you can't run that business, that's a problem to start off with. But you need to do that well. Again, the tyranny of the or and, not just this or that.
Yes. And the last question. Thank you so very much, George. And my favorite question is, now you have reached the end of your life. Right?
I hope not.
Touch wood, you know? And I think my question is, as Jorge Mendes, how would you like to be remembered, you know, long after you are gone? What sort of legacy would you like to leave behind?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a good question. Yeah. Firstly, I'd like to, it's going to be nothing to do with business. Yeah. No one at my funeral will say, oof, you know, this guy had the highest EBITDA of all the companies. He had the greatest profit of the, that's not, I've never been to one funeral, by the way, that ever said something like that. So no, I know from past experience that this is not going to surface, no matter what you do. So for me, I know it's not going to be about that, and neither do I want it to be. I'm going to do the best I can in business. Obviously, I'm going to do that, and I'm trying to make sure that we've got a great organization in Cell C and turn it around, and we're very much on track for doing that. We've done a lot in the last 2 years with the team that we've built and what we're doing. So we're in a really good position where I think we're now at the beginning of another story. We're only at the beginning of the new Cell C journey. We've been fixing, we've been repairing, we've been doing all of that. How would I like to be remembered? For all the soft, small things. And when I say soft, small things, I don't mean that they don't matter. I mean, if there's someone that they might be 30 years old at the time of my funeral that says, you know, one day when I was 16, I saw this guy at cutting of the ribbon of a shop, and he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, you know, you can be whatever you can be as long as you just believe in it. And maybe there's another person that says, you know, that he won't remember, but when I was a call center agent, he was a colleague of mine and he bought me lunch and he said, you've worked night shift and day shift, you might need this. And from that moment I knew we had a leader. Those are the stories that actually matter, to be brutally honest. And I think if I can touch people's lives in some way or the other like that, the rest guidance will give, the business stuff will give. But if you can give, and I've had this, by the way, I'm still alive, fortunately, and I plan to live a lot longer, although it's not all in my control. But I've already had people that said, do you remember we met once 17 years ago and you said this? And strangely, 99 out of 100 times I do. I was just at our business partner conference the other day. A lady came up to me, I'm going to mention her name was Lynn, that worked with me in Telstra Cellular Services back in the late 1990s. She says, George, do you remember me? And by the way, we gave her an award, her company that she now works for. And she started rattling off all these names where we worked together. I mean, Can you imagine, 26 years ago? Wow. And I had to do a double take. I remember the face, but and then she told me, and I said, yes, of course I do. And so these are the things that you want to be remembered by. And of course your loved ones, right? Your loved ones being your family. So I'm a granddad now, became a granddad a year and a bit ago. Wow. So going in 2 years in December, I've got a beautiful grandson. That's an amazing feeling, right? So, if I can get to spend more time with him and let him grow up and so on, then you can see the beauty of what you're able to contribute, right? And make sure that you can add a bit of value to their life, spend quality time together. And if you can leave your siblings, spouse, kids, grandchildren with a feeling that says, we didn't have a bad guy here. We'll miss him because he did mostly the right stuff. He got off track every now and then because we're flawed as human beings, but mostly he did the right stuff.
I love that. Someone once said, I want to be written in my epitaph that while alive, he lived. And I love that. While alive, he lived. And that's something that's important. Any parting shot to our viewers or listeners?
No, just thank you very much. Really appreciate it. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Hopefully there's a few nuggets that are taken out of this conversation. It's not meant to preach. It's more a bit of a sharing of a journey, a sharing of what we've done, what we're still doing. Anyone can be whatever they would love to be. Everyone has the capability. Everyone has the right mindset and energy and passion, determination. Don't let anyone hold you back and restrict you and say you can't, you will never be, you don't know. I think you're bigger than that. Don't let someone box you into something. And always have just an amazing attitude. The world needs some peace and love and care in general. So have a great attitude with people around you. You never know what they're going through. And I always say that people carry a lot. They arrive at work, but you don't know what they've left behind. You don't know what they're going through emotionally, physically, financially, etc., etc. So take a little bit more sensitivity around that, but have fun. I think, Veli, you just said it now. I think most people are guaranteed to die, but a lot of people don't live when they're supposed to be living, and it's kind of wasteful. You need to live a full life and put in the best effort. You're not here for a long time, you're here for a good time, and you should make the most out of it.
Absolutely. And someone as we close once said, "And your death. Don't just die." And I think it summarizes what we've just spoken about. And George, once again, thank you so very
welcome.
Kindly.
Thank you very much, Veli. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
I really appreciate your time, and you've blessed us with your presence. And I'm sure our listeners and our viewers were spoiled, with all the nuggets, that you shared. And I think for me, as a neuroengineer, I'm passionate about helping people understand how this thing works. In the brain, because neuroscience has helped us to clarify our understanding of human behavior. It has actually helped us to ground these, psychological concepts and philosophical ideas about what we're about to do or what we are capable to do. But it has grounded that into tangible biological mechanisms in the brain. So we can tell exactly what's happening in the brain based on what people do. So don't just assume that people can be yourself, like what George was what George has alluded to. Don't try to multiply yourself through other people, because you'll be killing them instead of building them up. So I think now saying from this neuroengineering podcast for leaders, we'd like to say thank you very much and wishing you well, and let us know what else you would like to hear from us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank
you,
George,
once again. Thank you very much.
You have just watched the latest episode of the NeuroEngineering podcast for leaders with Veli Ndaba, the NeuroEngineer. where we transform leaders from leadership darkness to leadership light. To engage us further on our services, keynotes, workshops, coaching, and merchandise, visit our website, velindaba.com. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this episode.